Hi, and welcome to my ACT Prep video for 2025 for our school at YHS here. Here's just some quick things. So some important pages to note in your ACT Prep book. The answer key to our Math Test 1 is on page 103. That just says which ones will be answered, which is our second slide here. There's detailed answers breaking down the work and explaining why each answer is the way it is from 139 to 155. There's obviously a practice test, which we are going to do right now, pages 56 through 71. And then there's chapter 6, which is all about improving your math score on page 229. There's also tends to be 3 or 4 more full ACTs. So there's more math tests and individual answer keys for those things. So just some resources you have. Quickly, here are quick answers that's on page 103. So for example, number 1 was E and all the way down to 60. Remember that for the math, the ACT, it's 60 questions in 60 minutes. I would always recommend finding some questions you feel comfortable with answering and coming back to the other ones later. Averaging an answer per minute is tough. So don't waste or don't spend too much time on any one particular problem. Move on and come back later. Now, after you grade them, find how many answers you get right. So for example, if you got 47 correct, that'd be a 29 ACT score. This chart is also on page 106. But that all being said, let's do some problems here. So, as I already showed you the answers, my answers are going to be circled, but we're going to go through the work. So for example, Cameron took 4 tests. His scores were as follows: 100, 60, 80, and 30. And then the fifth one was X. If the mean score of the 5 is 72, find the value. Mean just means average. So 72 would have to equal all my scores: 100 plus 60 plus 80 plus 32 plus X, all divide by 5. We can multiply both sides by 5. And then I could combine all these terms and subtract them to get x by itself. Therefore, x ends up being 90. On a real number line, point A has a coordinate of -3 and B has a coordinate of -7. What is the midpoint? Midpoint's just average, so -3 plus -7 divided by 2 gives me -5. Number 3, graphing one. This one would take you some time to think about. Now, it does say that they're going to be congruent. Their distances are going to be the same. So in this one says we already have A and D in that order. And then I can look at L and O in that order. I can look at the coordinate L and realize the distance of L to O has to be the same as the distance of A to D. Well, A to D goes from 1, 1 to 5, 1. So it has to be a distance of 4 units. So I can look at my L coordinate, which is -6, -5, and look at these ones right here. So -6, -5, this would be 4-way because -6, -1 would be 4-way in the y direction. -2, -5 would be 4-way in the x direction, so that works. -1, -6 doesn't work, 1, 5 wouldn't work, and 5, -1 wouldn't work. So I'm already eliminated those 3 answers. So now all I'm going to do is look at the 2 coordinates right next to it, C and D, in comparison to N and O. So if I look at C and D, the coordinate C is 6, 5 and D is 5, 1. I get 4 in the y direction and 1 in the x direction. So I want to find where a similar relationship holds there. Looking at N, it's -1, -1. I need to go 1 in one direction and 4 in the other. Well, this would actually only go 0 in that direction. That's a distance of 5 total, so it can't be A. Therefore, it would have to be B. The Venn diagram below, how many of them do not have cows? So any ones in this circle would be cows, aka the only ones that don't have cows would be those. So 12 plus 2 plus 5 gives me 19. I'm just plugging it in, so 2 times -6 times 5 minus 2 times 5 squared minus 2 times -6. I could type that whole string in my calculator and end up with -98. Number 6, design a spinner wheel that has exactly 4 sections. He wants each to have a 25% chance, and they do about 500 spins. So if I do 500 divided by 4, or 500 times 0.25, however you want to think about it, either way, that equals roughly 125. So the theory is, well, these numbers wouldn't be exactly 125, the numbers would be pretty close. For example, yellow is exactly 125. Green's a little high, but that'll happen. The problem is blue has way too much and red has way too little. So I would want to increase the red section by also decreasing the blue section. So that's why letter G is the correct answer there. Here, A and C are congruent, so if I were to draw them quickly, that means they are the same, where B is 143.6. Remember that triangles add up to 180, therefore A plus B plus C equals 180. I don't know what A or C are, but I'm going to have them as just be X because they're equal. So I would get 2X plus 143.6 equals 180. We could subtract 143.6, subtract 143.6, divide by 2, divide by 2. So that's why we would get each individual angle would be 18.2 degrees. Here we're just factoring. So what multiplies to -30 that adds to -1, that would of course be -6 and +5. Matrices, probably haven't seen them very often. Whenever you have a number out front, it acts just like you think it does, and it just distributes everywhere. So 5 times -4 gives me -20, 5 times 2 gives me 10, 5 times 0 is 0, and 5 times -5 is -25. So that's just a distribution. Okay. Number 10. So purchase some tickets and snacks. Um, one of them was 30, the other was 25, but they were consistent. So all it really comes down to is this problem is just asking for you to, when would they both have the same like denominator, for example. If I'm counting in increments of 15, and I do 30, and I do 45, 60, and 75, that way, I hit both 30 and 75, which is the goal, so therefore I'd have 15 people in my group. If I used any other number, for example 6, 75 is not divisible by 6, 75 is not divisible by 10, 30 does not break down by 25, and 75 does not break down by 30, so 15 is actually the only logical conclusion there. Let's see, okay. Multiply by 35, then the square root, and we're given 108. So I can do 108 times 35 and find the square root of that. If I were to find the square root of that, we end up with 108 times 35 is the square root of 3,780. From there, you could type that into your calculator and just look at which of these values would be similar, or you could break down the radical. There's a couple ways you can break down. You could recognize that it's 36 times 105, and therefore 36 has a perfect square root of 6. Or you could break down with a factor tree process where you're breaking down each individual value. So for example, if I were to break 3,780 divided by 2, that would be something like 1890, which then I could break down by 2 to give me 945, which I can break down by 3 to give me 315, which I can break down by 3 to give me 105, which I could break down by 3 to give me, let's see, 35, and that's 5 and 7. I would circle pairs, pair here, so I can get 2 times 3 on the outside, and then 3 times 5 times 7 has to say inside the radical. So that's how I can also get 6 square root of 105. 12 overlapping right angles. Well, so I know that this is a right angle. Shoot, sorry. And I also know that this is a right angle as well. So angle BOD is 90. Angle AOC is 90. We also know that AOD is 8 times BOC. So for BOC, I'm going to call that X. So therefore, AOD is going to be the same thing as 8X. Well, if I were to just do a simple addition of angles, I have this angle, and this angle I could add together. So angle AOD equals angle AOB plus angle BOC plus angle COD. Now, just erasing this for a second. We already decided that BOC was going to be X. Now, if I look at angle AOB, that is just AOC minus this BC. And AOC is a right angle, so I know that this has to be 90 minus X. And following the same logic, COD is the same thing. And because 8OD is 8X, I'm going to fill in 8X over there. Simplify, this turns into 180 minus X. 90 plus 90 is 180. Negative X plus X cancel, so I'm just left with negative X there. And of course, we can add X to both sides. Therefore, we get 9X equals 180. Divide by 9, X equals 20. But it says find AOD, so we're going to get 8 times 20, aka 160 for letter K. Number 3, you can't really read that. That's the cube root. That's the third root. That'd be negative 5, because negative 5 times negative 5 times negative 5 equals negative 125. 14, if this is the true, solve for x. So we would have 6y equals 5x minus 1. We can add 1. 6y plus 1 equals 5x. Divide by 5. X equals 6y plus 1 over 5. Boat is traveling at a speed of 30 miles per hour. What's that in feet per second? So 30 miles per 1 hour. Well, I know that 5,280 feet are in 1 mile. I also know that in 1 hour, that is 60 minutes, and in 1 minute, that is 60 seconds. Simple conversion problem. The reason I lay it out like this is my label mile cancels, hour cancels, minute cancels. So the only label I'm left with is feet per second. So I get 30 times 5,280 divide by 60 times 60. So I end up with 44. How many times greater is the new height than the original? So I'm just going to do 14.5 divide by 5.5. And I end up with 2 7/11. Okay. After 3 seconds after launch, I'm just going to plug in 3 for t. So negative 4.9 times 3 squared plus 30 times 3 plus 55. Get 100.9. Okay, probability it's a prime number. equal 30 pieces, so my denominator is going to start as 30, and I just need to figure out how many prime numbers there are. So we have 2, 3, or 1's not a prime number, 4 is not a prime number, 5 is a prime number, 6 is not, 7 is, 8 is not, 9 is not, 10 is not, 11, 13, 17, 19, 23, 29. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 prime numbers. 10 out of 30, aka letter J. So we have a right triangle, and this is just a SOHCAHTOA question. For an angle, it doesn't matter which. For the sake of argument, I'm going to put it right there for theta. This says, oh, I should have used alpha. Alpha. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse. This is my opposite side. This is my hypotenuse side. So I'm going to get a 13 right here. And a 5 is my opposite. Tangent is opposite over adjacent. So this is my adjacent side. Now the question asks, what is the cosine? Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. Adjacent over hypotenuse. So it has to be 12 over 13. Systems of equations, we have 2x minus y equals 7. I'm sorry, I don't need the over part. 2x minus y equals 7. Negative 4x plus 2y equals 2. One thing we can do is multiply this top one by 2. That's going to generate 2x times 2 is 4x. 2 times negative y is negative 2y. Equals 7 times 2 is 14. Now when I combine like terms, I get these cancel. Negative 4 plus 4 is 0x. 2x minus 2y is 0. 2 plus 14 is 16. That gives me 0 equals 16, which is not true. Therefore, this would be a no solution. That is the process of elimination. Another common one would have been to do substitution, would also work as well, or getting to both y's by itself, graphing and seeing if there's no intersection. Equivalent to y plus 7 cubed, well, that's just y plus 7 times y plus 7 times y plus 7. One of the most common mistakes that I see is this one right here, letter D. That would be just distributing the exponent. You cannot do that, so please don't. So if I multiply these two together, we're going to get y squared plus 14y plus 49, just foiling. Y times y times 7, 7 times y, 7 times 7. Combine like terms. And then, of course, we have to multiply it times the third exponent, or third factorial. Y times y cubed, or y squared is going to give me y cubed. That gives me 14y squared. It's going to give me 49y. It's going to give me 7y squared. It's going to give me 98y. And this gives me positive 343. After that, I have y cubed. I have 14y squared plus 7y squared, so 21y squared. I have negative 49y plus 98y, therefore 147y, and then the 343, therefore letter A has to be my answer there. The sum of three positive integers is 180, and the ratio is 532. Well, 5 plus 3 plus 2 is 10, and that ratio stays consistent. Therefore, I just know I need to multiply this by something to get this 180. Well, 180 divided by 8, or 118. 180 divided by 10 gives me a multiplication factor of 18. Therefore, 5 times 18, 3 times 18, and 2 times 18 would actually give me the numbers. So this would be 90, this would be 54, and this would be 36. If I added these three numbers together, I would get 180. The question, though, asks which one is the smallest. So that would be, of course, the 36. 33, we are subtracting two polynomials, so you have to keep, change, flip. All these signs get flipped. So I now have x squared minus y squared minus 6x squared minus 4xy plus y squared. And it's just a matter of combining like terms. Simplified out, simplified out. 6x squared x squared minus 6x squared is negative 5x squared. And then I just have this right there. So that's why letter A has to be my answer. Given that I is the square root of negative 1, well, square root of 9 is just 3, and I could rewrite this as square root 16 times square root negative 1, so this is going to be 4i, so I get 3 plus 4i there for letter K. Multiplying, so I'm going to, and it's asking about the differences in the seventh term, so 1, 2, 4, times 2 is 8, 16, 32, 64. And this one says I'm adding each time, but it's growing. So 1 to 2, I'm adding 1. Now I'm going to add 2 is 4, and I'm going to add 3 is 7, add 4 is 11, add 5 is 16, add 6 is 22, add 7 is 29. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, I don't care about this one. Seventh term and seventh term. What is the difference? That's a subtraction. 64 minus 22 gives me 42. First 5 terms are that. This is an arithmetic sequence, so if you know the formula of a sub n equals a sub 1 plus d times the quantity n minus 1, where I'm going up by 14 every single time, so I'd get 7 plus 14 times n minus 1, aka 7 plus 14n minus 14, or 14n minus 7, and I can plug in 25 directly for that to give me 343. Now, that's a fringe case to understand. Instead, we could say that we're going up 14 every single time, and there's already been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 terms. 63 is the 5th term. So which means if I'm finding t sub 25, I need to find 20 terms after this. I can just do 20 times 14, and then I would just give me 20 times 14, 280. And I can just do 63 plus 280 to get to 343 as well. Either way would work out. 27, we have a flagpole. They cast a 9-foot shadow and a 4-foot tall fence. They cast a 2.4 shadow. This is just a ratio question, so I'm finding the height of this. So h over 9 has to equal 4 over 2.4. Multiply both sides by 9 and type that all out. We would get C is 15. Okay. Length in centimeters of BC right there. Okay. Well, I could see that this is a right triangle. So to find this value, I can do Pythagorean theorem. 7 squared plus DC squared equals 25 squared. So you do that, and you can find that this side is 24. Therefore, this side is 24. Because they're rectangles, this has to be congruent to this. And then I could do a triangle right here. So I know that AE squared plus 24 squared has to equal 26 squared. So you find that AE is actually 10. Therefore, if this part is 10 in blue and this part is 7, x has to be 10 plus 7, and therefore 17, because the opposite sides are congruent in rectangles. Okay. This one says right here, center is HK, where it's subtracting from both of those normally. So my center is actually going to be 4, -2. The tricky thing about transformations is the inside parentheses is always flipped. So negative, negative, this is just a +4. This is the -2 because I'm subtracting -2. The other thing to note is it says equals r squared. So this is r squared is 25. Therefore, r has to be 5. That's why it's letter D. All right. Let's see what we got. All right. 5 gallons, and we have this ratio right here. Oh, sorry, 5 gallons of the water. So my solution to water has to be the ratio of 3 to 40. Well, it's giving me some conversion factors, which is nice. So if I have 5 gallons, I can multiply that by 4 to find the number of quarts, and then I can multiply that by 4 to find the number of cups. So I could do 5 times 4 times 4 there. So 5 times 4 is 20, times 4 is 80. So if my ratio has to be 3 to 40, and currently I have 80, well, I can see that this is just a times 2. So I just do 3 times 2 here to find 6. Law of cosines is given as this formula. You will often use law of cosines when you don't know a pair of information. So you would often use it in a situation like this where you have side, angle, side stuff. You can't use it on this one because you would need a third piece of information. Here you have a pair, so you'd probably use law of sines, which is easier. And here you actually would need one of the side angles, and you would need, because law of cosines has 3 pieces, you would need probably 2 sides, so you'd probably just use law of sines here. And here, you could find this angle, but you would need another side length to be able to do it, so it has to be letter B. Okay. Here, I'm just plugging in t equals 5, so 7 times e to the 3 times 5, all plus 1. Plus 1, and I could type that whole thing in my calculator. In radians, to go from degrees to radians, you multiply by pi over 180, because remember a full circle is 2 pi radians, and a full circle is 360 degrees. Divide both those factors by 2 gives us that conversion factor. So we're going to get 40 times pi over 180. Turns into 40 pi over 180, but I could simplify both numbers by 20, giving me 2 pi over 9. Okay, function is defined, and f of y happens this function. So function notation, the only thing that's different from right here, y equals f of x and y equals x of x minus 4, is this minus 4. Anytime there's a add or subtract on the outside, that's typically a vertical transformation. In this case, it's minus 4, so it's going to be a down 4 thing. Other way you could do it is you could graph y equals negative 9x squared. It would be something like this. And then you could graph this thing with a minus 4 component on it. And it would be like this. So you're just shifting it down 4 units. Equal to b, so we're trying to get b by itself. So 1/2 ab squared plus c equals d. Minus c times by 2 times by 2. So we get ab squared equals 2 times the quantity d minus c. Divide by a, square root. We get b equals the square root of 2 times the quantity of d minus c all over a. So letter G has to be correct. This is in factored form, so all these are zeros. So remember that this would be like x minus 3 equals 0. So I have to have 3 as an x-intercept. So I can already cut off that answer. It doesn't have 3 as an x-intercept. Following that same logic, I know that with x minus 2 equals 0, that x has to equal 2 as an intercept as well. So that doesn't eliminate any of those answers. And then lastly, I have x plus 1 twice. So I would get x equals negative 1, but I get a multiplicity of 2 because it's squared. So that 0 happens twice, which means I need to bounce off the axis at -1. So it can't be that one, can't be that one. It has to be either this one or this one because those fit both the things of my zeros. From there, I would look at my leading term, aka what number's out here. This is a +1, and I have 4 zeros, 3 different, and then this happens twice, so 4 zeros. So I know my end behavior would look like that. Therefore, it has to be letter A. Otherwise, the easiest way to do that would just be to graph it. But there's all the math that would lead me to a selection of A. Okay. So, one of them's going to earn 12%, the other one's going to earn 7%. For the sake of argument, I'm going to say that the 12% I'm going to call X, and the 7% I'm going to call Y. It asks about the maximum invested in the mutual fund, which is the 12%, so it's asking me to solve for X. So, I know that X plus Y equals 15,000, because that's total. X is going to be multiplied by 12% annual interest, so 0.12 of X plus 7%, so 0.07 Y has to be less than or equal to 1,700. Then I just have two variables with two equations, so just systems of equations. Like in minus x, we get y equals 15,000 minus x. I could plug that in for this y, so we'd get 0.12x plus 0.07 times 15,000 minus x less than or equal to 1,700. We could then just distribute this value right there. So that would give me 0.12x, let's see, plus 1,050 minus 0.07x less than or equal to 1,700. Combine like terms, 0.05x minus 1,050 minus 1,050 less than or equal to 650. Divide by 0.05, divide by 0.05. X has to be less than or equal to 13,000. So letter G would be the correct one. This is a probability table. It says, what's the probability that a randomly selected truck is black? So I know I'm selecting a truck. So my total has to be from the truck total. So 479 is going to be my denominator. And then how many trucks do I have that are black? Which would be 31. So it's got to be letter B. This is a rectangular hexagon, which means I know that each one of these sides is congruent. It's definition of regular. Technically, this is inscribed in a circle, so I can make radii from the center to each of these. And I know that the radii all have to be congruent. And because this is a inscribed thing, I know that the radii are also congruent with the sides right there. Therefore, this creates 6 different equilateral triangles. Originally, the diameter was 18, so I know that each of these radii would be 18 divided by 2, so I know that the radius is 9, and therefore every single tick mark is 9. And I'm finding the perimeter of the hexagon, so I just get 9 times 6 for 54 there. Okay. Angle A is less than B. Angle A is less than angle B, which is less than angle C. If I were to just draw this really quickly, A, B, C. Now the thing that's interesting is sides and angles are proportional. So this angle and this side go together, which means I know that side BC has to be less than side, well, opposite angle B would be AC, has to be less than the last side, which would be AB. So therefore, letter J has to be true. Okay, let's see. 4 kinds of pies, 1/4 were apple, and 1/2 were pecan. So if I just add those together, that accounts for 3/4 of the pies, which means 24 coconut cream and 8 peach. 24 plus 8 is 32. This has to be the other 1/4 of the pies because the 3/4 were coming from the other 2 kinds, apple and pecan. Therefore, I can do 32 times 4 to find that I would have that he sold 128 pies. Um, in a certain quadrilateral, so it's got 4 shapes, or 4 sides, excuse me. We have 3x plus 5 in both of these, and then we would have x plus 3 in both of these. There's 2 ways to really think about this. Because it's a quadrilateral, I know that all 4 sides add up to 360. I'm sorry, all 4 angles add up to 360. But because these are the same and these are the same, I then therefore know that these two form a linear pair, and those two add up to 180. So 3x plus 5 plus x plus 3 equals 180. Therefore, 4x plus 8 equals 180. So 4x equals 172. Divided by 4, we get x is 43. Okay. This is a recursive series. This right here is just means previous term. So in order to find the 5th term, I have to plug 16 in for that value right there. So I'm going to get 16 plus, and then this says n minus 1. If I'm finding the 5th term, n has got to be 5. So 5 minus 1 squared. 5 minus 1 would be 4. 4 squared is 16. 16 plus 16 is 32. And then I'm going to do the exact same process. 32 plus, now this is going to be 6 minus 1 squared. 6 minus 1 is 5. 5 squared is 25. 25 plus 32 gives me 57. So that's going to be 57 for letter C. If I type this in, I believe it's negative 10.8, and this is 37.5. So if I were to do it on the number line, negative 10.8 and 37.5, there would be 10 integers right here from negative 10 up to 0. And here there would be 37 integers. Integer just means whole number from 0 to 37.5. However, there's also the integer of 0 itself. So I theoretically get 10 plus 1 plus 37 to find there'd be actually 48 integers there. Let's see, during a particular event, 2, okay, A and B are mutually exclusive, so which is probably 0? The 0 would be both of those things happening at once. Mutually exclusive means they cannot happen at the same time. Therefore, D, probability of A and B, would be 0. This is just talking about matrices. So these two would have the first variable, because theoretically you can multiply this out. So this is going to be 6b and negative 3b. These two are going to have the second variable, so 2c and 8c. Because they're both positive, I'm going to keep them positive with a plus sign. And then I would get 7 and 1, because that's the answer matrix right there. Okay, x minus 3 is a factor, so I could either graph my original polynomial, or I could synthetically divide with this. So x minus 3 equals 0, x equals 3, so 3 is in my box. I'm going to write those coefficients, so I get 1, 1, negative 8, negative 12. 1, 3, 4, 7, negative 1. Wait a minute. 3 times 4 is not 7, silly. That's 12, so that's going to give me positive 4. 12 and 0. So I'm left with x squared plus 4x plus 4, which factors into x plus 2 quantity squared. Therefore, I would get -2 as a solution and +3 as a solution, and those are my only two solutions, therefore letter D. Okay. Median. Median means I list out all my data. I have 1, but I have it twice, so 1, 1. I have 3 4 times, so 3, 3, 3, 3. I have 4 3 times. I have 5 6 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then I have 7 3 times. 1, 2, 3. Median, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Cross, 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 cross. Because I'm stuck with these two, I'd find the middle of those two. So 4 plus 5 divided by 2 is 4.5. Let's see. Okay, so I could do 10 times 1 to find that 10 tourists only saw 10 cities. These 40 tourists each saw 2 cities. They saw a total of 80. And these 50 tourists saw 3 cities. They saw a total of 150. I can add all those together to find that all 100 tourists found a total of 240 cities. And I can divide it by that 100 to get that 2.4. So that's cities divided by tourists. Because it is a even root, I cannot put in negative values. Therefore, x must be a non-negative real number. All right, looking at it, I want the greatest possible value. Now, you'll notice that m is up top. So I want that value to be high. N and P are on the bottom. So I want those values numerically to be low, which should make sense because if I'm dividing by it, I'm breaking it up into more pieces if the number's higher. So mathematically, I want those numbers to be low. So looking at the values, I want the M to be the top value it can possibly be is 4, and I want to be the lowest value, which is 4, and P I want to be the lowest value, which is 8. So I would get 4 over 4 times 1 over 8. Well, 4 over 4 is just going to be 1, so I end up with just 1/8 overall. Okay, I'm given an equation, and then month 6, when that's going to be an x value of 6. So I would get sine of 5 times 6 plus 7.5, so that's going to be sine of 30 degrees. Plus 7.5. Sine of 30 is 0.5, so I get 0.5 plus 7.5, which is 8. But this says technically GX, the number in thousands. So this is an 8, this is 8,000. That's why it's letter K. Standard deviation is just how far apart the data is spread. If I were to look at most of these, for example, these 4, I'd find that the mean for all of them is 5. But these 5s are really close together. This data is pretty close together. And that just comes down to A and B. Well, 1 and 9 are going to be closer to my standard, or sorry, my mean of 5 than 0 and 10 are. So because 0, 0, 10, 10 is as extreme as it can be, that standard deviation is larger. Here, it's a volume. The whole thing was 2 inches, diameter of 18. Well, volume of a cylinder is going to be pi r squared times h, which should make sense because if I think about volume in general is typically my base shape area times my height. Well, what's my base shape? My base shape is a circle. So this is just area of the circle on the bottom. But I need to find my radius, so I can find radius equals 18 divided by 2, so my radius is 9. So I'm going to get pi times 9 squared times the height change, which we said earlier was 2. So I'm going to get 9 squared, which is 81. 81 times 2 is 162, and of course I still have this pi. So 162 pi, letter J. This is a weird one. So I have H of F of G of A equals 1. So I know that the H part equals 1. So I'm going to start right there. Okay. Now the question becomes, I'm going to work my way in. What F value gives me 1? That would be right here, the F of 1. F of 1 is 1, which created the H of 1 is 1. Then I get to the G. Well, the G of 1's down here. But what X value gave me that 1 for the G? That would be 5. So letter E is 5. 60. Let's see. Landing face up is 3 times probability of landing face down. This is what's called an expected value problem. The way you do it is you find the probability of 1 times the value, and then you add it to the probability of 2 times the value of 2. So for example, it says 3 times probability of landing face down, so the probability of that one's got to be 3/4, but I get $1. So the other one's going to be 1/4, but I get $2. So I get 3/4 times $1, which would be 0.75. I get 1/4 times $2, which would be 50 cents, and I can add those together, give me 125, aka letter F. Thank you for listening, and I hope you have a great day.